So in the UFC, we do have our fair share of prospects, and these prospects are not all made equally. Sometimes we have good ones, sometimes we even have bad ones, and even sometimes we have some that are just babied to the top. But even with that, we have some prospects who we like, who we don't like, who we're indifferent to, or just flat out don't care about at all. So what I decided to do was compile an entire list of almost every single prospect in the UFC and give them a grade based on my opinion. So this is your nice quarterly prospect report. Now, if you are unfamiliar with this, I do a prospect report for every single recap video that I do. I update you on the prospects from that card and add them to the list. So for the past, I would say, month or 2 months, I've been pretty much developing a list of prospects and put them into a nice good old Excel spreadsheet and sorted them out based on the grade that I give them. Now, I do have some rules for this list. Not every single prospect just gets slapped onto it and I say, here you guys go. I have some rules. I'm gonna lay them out for you real quick. So rule number 1, you have to be below 35 years of age. You cannot be over the age of 35 because at that point, you are not a prospect. Prospects in general are just kind of the younger guys. I don't like having a 37-year-old like Douglas Silva de Andrade in this list because I just wouldn't feel like he's really a true prospect. I want some of the younger guys who have a potential future to become champion or get very highly ranked in the division a chance at being on the list, other than some of these older veterans who are still kind of unranked. And speaking of being unranked, number 2, you have to be unranked. You cannot be ranked and make this list. If you are ranked, then at that point, in my opinion, you do become a contender, not a rightful prospect. So you have to be unranked, and once you get ranked, then you will no longer ever again in your entire UFC career be considered a prospect again. So for example, Bo Nickel would not qualify for this list because he is ranked. Now, it is kind of murky there because, you know, Bo Nickel is somewhat of a prospect still, but I still think once you hit the rankings, I feel like that it's a fine line there that I don't want to cross. And I think once you hit the rankings, being a prospect is kind of out of the wayside. You're more of a contender now. And then for my third and final rule, you have to be in the UFC. Now, I'm planning on the future maybe updating this rule to end up being a fight limit. Let's say you have 10 fights in the UFC and you haven't been ranked yet, then maybe you kind of aren't a prospect anymore. But I think for now, I'm just going to stick with you're unranked and you're below the age of 35. But that might change in the future. I think as we get more and more prospects in, I'm going to have to start cutting some out because at some point it's a bit ridiculous. But those are my rules nevertheless, and let's get into this prospect report. And I will break it down to you to help you understand what exactly is going on here. So I'm going to pull up the top 25 first. So now what the top 25 is the top 25 prospects. Now, what qualifies you into making the top 25 is if you look all the way over, kind of on the right-hand side, it is the third column from the right. So you see the overall section. I have them sorted out based on their overall. As you can see, Gene Silva's at the top there with the 97 grade. He qualifies as the #1 ranked prospect right now, according to me. Now, how did I get to that number? Basically, what I do is I take all of their fights, I give them a grade based on their performance. So, for example, if Gene Silva got a one-punch KO knockout in the first round, it probably is a 100 grade. I won't lie to you. I feel as if those kind of performances deserve a 100, but let's say he has a really good performance where he dominates a Drew Dober, but doesn't finish him and wins by a cut, then maybe that's a 95 overall grade. Still a very high grade, still an A, but maybe not as great as a quick one-punch KO knockout where he dominates the guy in the first round. So now what I do with these grades is I take them all up, I add them all up actually, and I divide them by how many fights they had. So Gene Silva has had, I believe, only 4 fights in the UFC. So there is 1 fight missing on the prospect report. So as you can see in that change category, it's the very last column on the right. You can see that his 100 grade did nothing, so he gets just a 0. So I'm still accounting for every single one of his fights in the UFC. If I didn't account for it for like another prospect, then they just get an NA, not applicable, because I didn't account for their previous fights in the UFC. This typically is reserved for guys who have made their UFC debut, so they don't have a previous grade to go off of, or it might just be some guys who I'm too lazy to go back and rewatch their other fights to give them a true grade. So from there on out, then they'll be graded once they fight again. But as you can see, this is the top 25. On the very far left with their rank, you might see Nathaniel Wood with a blue next to his number, or the blue number next to his name. All that means is that they have fought on the most recent card. So every fighter you see in blue means they just fought on the most recent card. So going forward, you see a blue number, that means they fought on the most recent card. Now at the very, very bottom, you see who dropped out and who's on the outside looking in. Now for the outside looking in, that's basically reserved for the guys who aren't in the top 25, but still have the higher grades. So that maybe if somebody loses, like maybe a Peyton Talbot loses again, he might drop out of the top 25 and we'll see Myron Santos come in and replace him. But basically those guys just don't have a high enough grade yet to enter the top 25. And if you have dropped out in favor of somebody else, then you will be in the dropped out section, which was Ebo Aslan for Nathaniel Wood. So that's kind of the premise of it. It's a very, I would say, subjective list. Some of these grades can be debated. I wouldn't lie to you. However, I feel like this is just the most, I would say, somewhat factual way to kind of get to this conclusion on who's the best prospect. There is no concrete way to, there's like no great stat to like really be concrete firm this guy is the best prospect. But I think just grading their fights individually and then averaging them out is kind of the best way to come to a at least decent conclusion. Now there is some issues with this because as you can see, guys who make their debut and have a great performance are graded up higher because they've only had one fight, not enough sample size to give them a true grade. So that can be the big flaw in this. I might find something in the future to help combat that. But overall, you might have to deal with that for now. But let's get into these prospects. I already mentioned Gene Silva. There's not much really to say about him besides he is the next prospect. He is the next contender if he does end up beating Bryce Mitchell. So he won't be on this list for a long time if he does beat Bryce Mitchell. I am picking him to beat him. So I do think that he will drop out as soon as that fight happens, as soon as he does get past Bryce Mitchell, if he does get past Bryce Mitchell. But I think looking at the number 2 spot with Sam Patterson might be the most controversial fighter on this top 25 list. And you might be asking me, Kendall, why you got Sam Patterson number 2? So I kind of made a mistake, somewhat, a little bit in the past. What I did for good old number 15 there, Canadian Nzechukwu, so I can't say his name without stuttering. What I did for him is that I didn't actually grade his light heavyweight fights because I felt like him moving up to heavyweight, kind of maybe he would reinvent himself as a fighter. So I did kind of the same thing for Sam Patterson, and I didn't grade his Yanel Ashmuz. I didn't grade his KO loss on Yanel Ashmuz. He moved up to welterweight, and he's looked like a beast ever since then. I think it's fair for me to reassess him because him in another weight class, I think it's just a different sort of animal. And he's proven that. Beating Johan Linnes, beating Kiefer Crosby, beating Danny Barlow by finish most recently has been very, very impressive. And I think he does deserve, some credit there, man. Maybe you can argue he's not the number 2 ranked prospect right now in the UFC. That's a fair argument. But I think based on his last welterweight performances, I think he does fall into that category. Or at the very least, he should be very high up. I think he should be in the top 25, no matter what, with the wins that he's gotten. Now, I won't go through every single prospect here, so feel free to pause the video and look at any certain one you want to see at any time. But we'll move on to Kevin Vallejos. I mentioned him real quick just because I feel like he might be like a really good prospect coming up. I think like even though he only has one fight in the UFC, I really do see the potential in him moving forward. He is a bit too small for featherweight in my opinion, but I still think his talent and his skill, he's like a mini Ilia Topuria there. I think he will go on to do good things. But moving on, RDR is also on this list, Reiner de Ritter. You could argue he shouldn't be on this list, and maybe I probably should double check to make sure he's not ranked. I'm pretty positive he isn't. Okay, so I actually did mess up. RDR is ranked number 13 right now as the current making of this video. So yeah, he's out. He's out of the prospect report. So let's just ignore him and pretend Myron Santos is in number 25 and everybody else has moved up 1. My fault. I probably should have double checked that just to make sure. but you know, it is what it is. Don't just ignore him for now. And if you're curious about Myron Santos, I'll show you the top 50 coming up next, which does feature him. So he will be in this video, by the way. But I guess for now, I'll go ahead and I'll mention Vinicius Oliveira here. This guy has, I think, arguably the most potential to beat like a Morab. I think any grappler he fights, he might just actually embarrass. And the reason I say that is because this guy's takedown defense is ridiculous, out of this world. When he fought Ricky Simon, stuffed all of his takedowns. It was a bit of an iffy performance still, but him being able to pretty much say F you to Ricky Simon and stuff all of his takedowns and still beat him on the feet, I think is very, very impressive. And then when he fought Saeed, that was kind of, I would say, his worst performance so far, because Saeed did do more on the feet for the first round, but then he gassed himself out, which I thought Vinicius would go on to finish him, especially with the way how Saeed was looking in that third round and second and third round. So again, not the best performance, but I think for a guy who's in a division where grapplers are kind of dominant right now, I can see Vinicius Oliveira going out there and just fucking stuffing some guys' takedowns and making them gas out and then winning on the feet. So I think he has good potential. I will mention Peyton Talbot as well. Obviously, losing to Raoni Barcelos is very, very disappointing, but he still makes the top 25 based on his past performances. I think he still is a prospect, even though he lost. If you want to say he got fraud checked, I guess go ahead. He did kind of get fraud checked, but I still think there is a bright future for him. He's still young. I think he's like 26, if I'm wrong, if I'm right. But you can't really ignore all of the other stuff he did. Like beating Cameron Simon in a dominant fashion is a really, really impressive thing. Cameron Simon is not a scrub at bantamweight here. So I think Peyton Talbot still has some hope for the future. I still think he will do good things. And as long as he goes on to improve his grappling defense, I think it'll be just fine. Just need some more time to work on that. I say take some time off and just work on your grappling. And then if he can stuff some takedowns from here on out, he'll be just fine and dandy and ready to go. Nathaniel Wood, he is kind of that guy I think has a lot of fights in the UFC. I think he's closing on that 10 mark in the UFC. So maybe, I guess, if I do change the rules in the future, Nathaniel Wood might not qualify anymore for this list. But overall, man, like, he is really one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. No, I don't think I counted for his featherweight or for his bantamweight wins as well, or losses. I think I counted only his featherweight ones. But the dude is just one of the most, like, satisfying guys to watch in the UFC, man. Like, the way he fights is just so technically, like, almost perfect. It's so good to watch. So Nathaniel Wood, man, I do rate his performances. Sometimes he loses, sometimes he gets dropped, like against a what was his name, Andre Philly. But when he wins, it's always very technical and just very, very fun to watch. For SCM, below Nathaniel Wood is actually, might be kind of wrong. I do think that Freziem might be a better prospect than Nathaniel Wood right now. But Freziem is just impressing me. Like, I didn't have much hope from him, especially when he lost to Terrence McKinney. I was like, his grappling is just going to be fucking dog shit and just kind of lower him down or anchor him down for the rest of his UFC career. But it seems like he fixed that. And now since he's beaten Claudio Puelles, he's just been on a massive streak. Like, beating Matt Favola, beating Mike Davis. Mike Davis is a really good prospect in his own right. Not anymore now, but he used to be before he had his whole I don't want to hurt anybody sort of attitude. So Freziem, dude, is on his way to getting a ranked opponent soon, and he might not be on this list for very much longer, but I still think he is one of the most talented prospects in the UFC right now. Ribovic, Esteban Ribovic, it sucks. He lost to Hack Press. I thought he kind of could have an argument to win that fight, maybe in that third round. I forget exactly, but this guy is such a fun fighter to watch that I can't give him a low grade, man. He is just one of the most entertaining lightweights right now that's not in the rankings currently. I think at some point in his career, he will go on to hit the rankings. Now, will he be top 5? Will he be championship level? I don't know. But if you haven't tuned in for one of his fights yet, you are surely missing out. I need you to go back and rewatch his Daniel Zellhuber fight and his Hack Perez fight. Those fights are not fight of the year, but maybe his Zellhuber one might be. But they're very, like, they're top 10 fight of the year candidates. They're just such good fights to watch. But that pretty much concludes our top 25 list. Now it's on to the top 50 list. These are the guys who haven't made the top 25. They're not regarded as one of the best prospects in the UFC, but there still are prospects who maybe throughout time, if they continue to win, they might crack that top 25 list. So it's in two parts. It's not all 50. I think it's like 46, but there will be 50 soon. But for our top 25 list, of course, as you can see with the others receiving votes category, we do have Myron Santos sitting here at number 1 in the top 50. Now, what really kills him is that Francis Marshall win, which I do think he won, honestly, but it was a very close fight. And if you're barely scooting by Francis Marshall, that's not impressive. Obviously, he got dropped in that first round as well. Very disappointing performance from him. So that performance mainly puts him out of the top 25 and gets him into the top 50. But I think for the future, if he gets another win, I think he'll be fine. He'll crack that top 25 again, and he'll be right back in there. Quai Fernandez, again, I won't go through all of these guys, but him going out there and shutting down Garam was, I would say, very impressive. Now, do I think he'll be anything in the future? Probably not. And is he 35? He might be over 35. No, he's 30. I lied. He's 30. He's 30 years old, so he's good. He still qualifies for the list. But I guess we'll move on to good old Ibo Aslan, who was on the top 25 list and just recently dropped out because he just had a really bad loss to Jan Kutalaba. Honestly, you could give him a lower grade than a 60. I think I was being a bit generous to him by giving him just a 60. So Ibo Aslan, he drops out because, you know, some of these Nathaniel Woods, man, have just better wins and better performances, and you just can't lose as a prospect by finish, right? If he went out there and had a close fight with Jan Kutalaba and just barely lost, he would probably still be in the top 25, but him getting finished is just stinky. Don't like that. Don't want that. We'll move on. I guess we'll also jump down all the way to 21 with Chris Padilla. I'll mention him because he fought on the Linden card as well. I am not too impressed with him whatsoever. I don't think he really is that good. He beat Rong Zhu. Good job. You beat Rong Zhu. Like road to UFC guys just always end up disappointing at some point in their careers. So I guess he got a win with a nice elbow. Could call it lucky. I don't know. Depends on your take. But he just fought Jai Herbert recently, and that fight was stinky. Very bad. Very low paced. Not much output. Just didn't look too highly skilled. What's going on with Jai Herbert? I guess Ilya Taporia scared him into oblivion. So I don't know. It's tough right now for Chris Padilla. I don't think he will ever be in the top 25 if I'm being real with you. But one guy I will mention, and it's not a compliment. I have not too many good things to say about him, but he is below Chris Padilla and Nazim Sadikov. This guy is really, really, really badly on fraud watch. Like, he is awfully on fraud watch because, yeah, he beat Terrence McKinney. Good win. Cool. Good job. Borshev got a draw. He lost. I think he lost Borshev. Borshev won 2 rounds to 1, but he got a draw. Got that, 10-8 round, which I don't think was a 10-8, if in my opinion. You could call it 10-8, but I think it was a 10-9, honestly. Gets a draw, majority, decision, whatever. It was ill. But in his most recent fight against Ismail Bonfim, he was getting outclassed every single second of that fight. Lands a head kick, which landed a head kick, but it ends up, I think, closing the eye of Ismail Bonfim. He can't see anymore. Oh no, he gets a win. So I gave him some leeway because he did technically, land that head kick and cause that little eye injury to Ismail Bonfim. However, he was just getting outclassed, and as a prospect, I do worry about him in the future unless he can improve. But he is young. I can see him moving up in the future, just that he needs to improve before he loses again. And I guess now for part 2 of our top 50 list. Now, this is the part where a lot of these guys who have just made their debut and got KO'd out cold, or just have had a couple fights in the UFC and just have consistently lost, kind of come into play here. So you see Navajo Sterling is very low on this list because of the fact that he's only had 1 fight against Tuco Tucos, where I thought he should get a first round KO and embarrass this guy, but turns out he kind of had some of a scrap with him. That to me is very disappointing. But I do expect him to continue to rise. Like, if I had to take anybody from the top 50 who has the most potential to eventually hit the top 25, I do think Navajo Sterling would be one of those contenders to do so. Just he needs to fight better competition and get some wins here. So as he progresses throughout his UFC career and he gets more wins, which I do think he will get more wins, it's light heavyweight for goddamn sakes, he should go up in the prospect report. I'll mention Hamdi Abdel-Wahab here for a little bit because I cannot make a video that has Hamdi Abdel-Wahab in it and not talk about Hamdi Abdel-Wahab. Uh, he's winning, but that's it. He's just winning. So I guess there's not much to say about him at all. But he's winning. So good shit for Hamdi Abdel Wahab. Maybe he might impress me some more in the future. But I don't think he will. I don't think he will. And then with Javid Bashrat also being so low on this list, it does hurt me to say that, or just to see that in general, because at one point I did think he would hit the rankings at bantamweight, but yeah, he's just not winning. I didn't count a Victor Henry fight because it was a draw, so if fights go to a draw or like a no contest, then I just don't even count them. But Amon Zahabi, Ricky Simone, flatlined by Ricky Simone. It's tough. It really is tough for Bashrat. But I guess with that, I'll move on to the last guy on this list. I don't want to wear this out for too long and talk about every single prospect because it's just going to be like a 2-hour video at this point if I do that. But Josias Musasa is last on this list right now because, again, only one fight in the UFC, and getting KO'd by old man Carlos Vera is very, very disappointing for a guy who might be a prospect. Now, will he go higher on this list at some point? Yes, but I think that loss might stain him forever. So I might have to adjust a weighting scale of this grade if he goes on to do like really impressive things. Like let's say Musasa fights some guys next and he wins by easy finish. Then maybe I might have to adjust the 10 loss against Carlos Vera a little bit more in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much the prospect report. There isn't a ton so far. Like there's a lot of names on here, but not a ton of information yet. I will go through every single prospect as we continue on. Obviously for this week, we do have Moreno versus Urseg. So I will take some of the prospects from that card and add them onto here. So be on the lookout for the recap video, because if you do like the prospect report, then you will be, I guess you will be interested in some of these new prospects in the next card. So that's pretty much it, man. If you have any sort of criticisms or anything you want to see added to this or anything you want to see taken away, or maybe a whole new grading scale, which I probably won't do, but if you have any sort of feedback for me, don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section down below and give me your overall opinion. But with that being said, I'm out of here, guys. Like, subscribe, hit that bell icon for notifications, but I'll see y'all later. Peace.